TorahCafe.com.
When I was director of St. Francis Hospital Department of Psychiatry, I developed a program for training psychiatric physicians, a resident training program. And as I looked at these cartoons and I realized the enormous amount of insight that there are to them, I used to put them on the bulletin board and under a title of postgraduate training, right? And I have used these. Let me just tell you an interesting thing. Do you remember year after year, if you've been a reader of Peanuts, that Lucy holds the football and Charlie Brown is going to kick it, right? And as Charlie Brown runs to kick the football, she pulls it out and he falls on his back. The next year, right, same procedure. This goes on every year, right? It went on every year for maybe 25 years. Right? And she always finds an excuse to, and Charlie Brown says, I'm going to kick this ball out of the universe. Right? He's done it so many times, each time he's failed, he does it again. Right? So one time I was sitting with a gentleman, happened to be a CEO of a company, and he was an alcoholic. However, he didn't drink every day. He'd go for 2 or 3 months without drinking, but when he drank, once he started drinking, he got drunk and ended up in the hospital. So after his third admission to the hospital, I said to him, look, can't you get the message? Right? You can't handle alcohol. Your system won't take it. You know? So stop drinking. Get some treatment for it. And he said, no. I know what to do. I know what the mistake was. This won't happen again. I know that I can drink safely. So it occurred to me, and I went to my bookcase and I took out some of Charlie Brown's books, and I showed him how every year Charlie Brown thinks it's going to be different, right? And it never is any different, right? And so he looked at them and he laughed and he said, yeah, that's me, right? So it's interesting. I was never able to convince him, but Charlie Brown could convince him. So I began to use cartoon therapy. And after getting a bunch of these cartoons together, I contacted United Media, and I said, hey, do you think Mr. Schulz would agree to having this in a book? So within a few days, I got the answer that he'd be thrilled to have him in the book. So we ended up doing 4 books, and I had the wonderful opportunity to meet Mr. Schulz, and I was just amazed at his enormous insights. And I said to him, Sparky, don't you see what you're saying in this cartoon? And he said to me, Abe, if I allowed myself to see in my cartoons what you see in them, it would paralyze me and I would never be able to draw. So it's interesting, he had to make himself oblivious of that, right? But his cartoons are fantastic, and if you pick up any Charlie Brown, they still run the old strips. Not every cartoon strip is a lesson in psychology, right? But there's some that are just entertaining. But there are some really where his insights are enormous. What happens if the family has chosen you to be the loser, right? First of all, if you recognize that, right, you're 50% away. You're 50% toward the goal, right? Because most people who have become the loser in the family don't recognize it. This is so often it happens in the family of the alcoholic, right? The father's an alcoholic. Everything is terrible, right? The wife cannot get the things she wants because he doesn't make enough money or he squanders it. And the son can't possibly do well in school because of the father's behavior. And the daughter can't have her friends over because the father's an embarrassment. So everybody has an excuse as to why things are not going good in their life. Right? Then the father gets treated for alcoholism, right? And he becomes sober. And he's not drinking anymore. And he's even making more money. Right? The wife is still miserable. Right? The son is not doing well in school. The daughter is not doing socially. And they don't have anyone to blame it on. Right? So I think that it's important if the person can recognize that I have become the loser in the family, that he or she, if that obviously they're at the age where they can think that way, should avail themselves of some good counseling and see a good therapist about how to handle that. This is not anything that I can give you a curbside consultation on, but it's going to depend a great deal on using the proper method to be able to keep the family intact and not alienate everybody in the family and say, I'm not going to be the loser anymore. But it can be done with some help. I think that if we realize that everything that happens, now, let me first say this. We have control of doing things in our lives because God does not intervene whether we do something morally right or morally wrong, right? God is not going to stop a person from committing a crime because a person was given the freedom of choice to act properly, to do good or to do bad. But other than that, right, everything else that happens is somehow under the direct control and supervision of God. Now, there may be things that we don't agree with. Trust me, I don't believe that tsunamis are any good. Right? And I don't believe that earthquakes are any good. Right? But there's so many things that are beyond our understanding that I have to say, look, I turn it over to faith. I know that I believe in God. I believe that God has no sadistic desires, and that everything that God does is for somehow good, even though I can't begin to understand how that can happen. As I don't understand why an earthquake can be good, right? But then my intelligence is very limited. But if a person can see everything that happens as being that God is in charge, right, then I do think that under all circumstances a person can be happy with it. One of the things that I got a little bit of understanding with right, is when I was sitting in a pediatrician's office, and the mother was there with a little baby, and the child was just playing around, happy, whatever. The child was there for his third immunization, right? And the child was playing happily, and then the doctor came out in his white coat, and the child took one look at the doctor, right, and screeched, right? Because he knows what happens now. Yeah? This is not a good person. Right? This is the person who comes and stabs you and makes you sick for 2 days. Right? And then the mother, who's his protector, right? And she's the one who loves him. She takes him into the doctor's office, right? And she restrains him. Right? What is this kid thinking? What kind of terrible person did you turn out to be? I thought you loved me. Right? There's no way the child can understand that this immunization is going to prevent him from having terrible diseases. Right? His mind is too infantile. He can't understand that. And I realize my mind compared to God's is even less than the mind of an infant compared to the mother. Right? We can't begin to understand it. Right? But I do have faith that, and incidentally, something very interesting. After the child gets the injection from the doctor and he screams his head off, right? He throws his arms around the mother for security. You say, why are you doing that for? Don't you realize you can't trust her? Don't you realize that she collaborated with the doctor? Right? But somehow the child knows, I don't understand what happened. All I know is that she's my mother and she loves me, she'll protect me. That's where we are with God. I don't understand earthquakes. I don't understand tsunamis. I don't understand all these horrible diseases that we experience. But all I know is this is the one who loves us. Right? And that way I can have some hope. The problem of self-esteem in children is a crucial one My first answer is that I think self-esteem is contagious. I think that if parents have good self-confidence and good self-esteem, it's much more likely that the children will pick that up, right? But there are 1,000 ways in which we cover up our loss of self-esteem. And this is what I've written in my books, the kind of different patterns that we have covering up our loss of self-esteem. So there are so many people that have a loss of self-esteem and don't even know it. But there are some excellent books on self-esteem for parents. There's a book called Building Self-Esteem in Children. It was written by a child psychologist, Patricia Burney, and it's something that I think that every parent, every teacher, every grandparent should read. There's little techniques in which we can help children feel better about themselves. But it's just not a question of feeling better. It's a question of helping the child bring out her or his maximum potential. Telling the child, you're wonderful, that giving those compliments are not going to do it. But we have to as parents, get to know what are our child's abilities and bring out the best in them. Right? Not every child is equally endowed, right? But every child has his or her own particular abilities, and we have to get to know our children and bring out whatever we can in them, and that gives them the best self-esteem. You know, I don't know that you can ever help someone else be happy, because I think ultimately all we can do is make changes in ourselves. Right? I don't think you can make changes in anyone else. However, you can be supportive of another person. First of all, to be able to listen to the other person, to empathize with their feelings, to be able to empathize and let them know that you're trying to understand their problems. You feel for them. You feel their joys and share in their sorrows. I think that if we know something about self-esteem, then we can direct the person and say, hey, look, you know, there's some things that you're doing that are really beneath your dignity. You know, you are a much better person. That's what my father used to tell me. Right? Why are you doing something? He used to say it in Yiddish, you know, spasnish. You know, why are you doing something that's beneath your dignity? And we can help people realize that, you know, there are things that you could be doing that you're overlooking. And essentially, you're not in a position, therapist, to be able to do this for them, but to encourage them that they ought to get some help in finding out who they are. Right? Because, you know, my guess is that 90%, maybe 99% of the people go through life without ever finding out who they were when they were alive. Right? And I think that if you see a person who's in that kind of condition, and if you can tell them, look, you are really a hell of a lot better person than you give yourself credit for being, but don't take it from me because I'm not trying to give you compliments. Get to someone who can help you understand and bring out the best in you.
Hello. This is sort of a question of empty nesters, maybe a lot of other people out there. When I was little, when I was in 6th grade, I had to write an autobiography. And I wrote that I wanted to be a mommy when I grew up. I wanted to have 2 boys and 2 girls. I wanted to be a Spanish translator, and I wanted to be an Olympic swimmer. Well, so the years go on. Obviously, I'm not an Olympic swimmer, and forget the Spanish, but I did get married, and I raised my children. I buried 1 child. I became a widow. Eventually, I had a stroke, so I've had to focus on myself. And now I live alone. My kids are in their 20s, and they don't really need mommy anymore. So I'm wondering, where do I look to find what my purpose is in life? If it's not being a wife or a mother, I mean, I know I'm here for Hashem, but what am I supposed to do, sit and just daven all day?
I think that in many ways that addresses many of us, even though our circumstances may be different. But if we truly believe that we are created to become that which we can be, right? Yeah, obviously, going through sufferings of losing family members, especially losing a child, I mean, this is one of the worst distresses, one of the worst pains that a person can possibly have. But it occurs to me that the Talmud tells a very interesting story, that the great sage Rabbi Eliezer became very ill. And some of his disciples came in to see him, to visit him. And one of the disciples said to him, our teacher, you are more valuable to us than even a father and mother, because a father and mother can only give us the goods of this world, whereas you've prepared us for the world to come as well. And Rabbi Dr. doesn't recognize him, doesn't answer him. And the next person says, our teacher, you're better to us than the sun, because the sun can provide energy only for this world, but what you've given us is the next world as well. Rabbi Dr. doesn't answer him. And the next one says, our teacher, you are better to us than the rain, because the rain provides growth for plants and for this world, and you have given us. Rabbi Dr. doesn't acknowledge it. And then Rabbi Akiva, the great Rabbi Akiva, says, suffering can be precious. So Rabbi Eliezer says, help me sit up. I want to hear what Akiva is saying. Now take a look. He ignores the first three, and he wants to hear what Rabbi Akiva is saying. Why? Because looking back at life and seeing what is it that I have accomplished, oh, look what I have done. That's essentially vanity. That's essentially a false pride. Right? I'm not interested in what I have done. I want to know, what can I do with myself today? Right? And what Rabbi Akiva said, look, my teacher, in the years when you were capable of teaching, then your purpose was teaching and you fulfilled that purpose. You can't do that today. Right? You're bedridden, you can't teach. The only thing you can do today is accept the suffering that you're going through with the faith and the justice of God. And if that's all you can do, then you are fulfilling your purpose today. It's a very powerful message. At any one moment in our lives, right, we must do with ourselves whatever our best abilities are. Right? Now, sometimes circumstances are, as the woman pointed out, with a great deal of distress, with many losses. Right? And you can't go back and turn history around. But what you can do with yourself is, what can I do with myself today to fulfill myself to be the best person that I can be? Now, it's easy to say, not easy to do.